Hi everyone, welcome back. It's been about 2 months since my last video, maybe even a little bit more. The reason for that is because my growing season here in Michigan is pretty short. This year and most years I don't start gardening and I don't really sow my first seeds direct until the end of May. And basically gardening here is end of May to mid-October. And since we're kind of mid-late December right now, it has been quite a while. We've had several killing frosts. It snowed here on Halloween. So it's just, my season's over and I haven't had a whole lot to show you. So that's why I've been gone. I would like, however, to provide an update on the garden and kind of where it's at right now and what I'm thinking for next year. So that's kind of what I wanted to do here today. And I also, just right now, I'm sitting in front of my Christmas tree. I don't know if you can't really tell that there's a Christmas tree in front of me, but I will insert a video right about now to show you what my tree looks like in my living room as I sit here recording. And I have Monk, the show Monk, playing in the background. And honestly, if you haven't seen Monk and you are in the United States and you have a subscription to Prime, you can watch Monk on Prime. It's delightful. It was a show from the early 2000s with Tony Shalhoub he's a suspended police detective, and he's kind of a PI now, but he's got some very severe OCD and some he's got a lot of phobias, so it's hysterically funny. I watch this show and I just laugh. But anyway, that has nothing to do with anything anymore, other than what I'm doing right now because it's cold outside and there's no gardening. Now, when I tell you about the fact that there's no gardening, what I really mean is, again, frost. It's not warm enough to grow things here right now. It was right around Halloween, maybe like the week after Halloween. The ground hadn't frozen yet, and my dad and I actually turned the soil in the garden over to prepare for winter. I think he thinks that we're gonna do that again in the spring. I will get to that in a second, but at this, hopefully, future Shelby, who is editing everything here, has already inserted a video of what the garden and the yard kind of currently looks like. It's gray and gloomy outside, and the soil has been turned in the garden, and even the plants along the side of my garage are, they're just ready for the winter. They're ready for their resting period, and that's what winter is for humans and all, I don't want to say all life, but really winter is supposed to be for rest, and that includes plants and not all others. That's a lot of life here on Earth really depends on the winter as a resting period. That's what we're gonna say. So so you've seen the garden now at this point. So going into next year, I've had a lot of things on my mind since this current growing season. I can't be the only person who does this, but I literally start planning next year's garden while I'm sowing the seeds for this year's garden, and it's been like that since I started gardening in 2020. Now, that being said, I've done some planning, some garden planning, quite a lot actually, because there was a period of time during the summer, and I don't know, it might still be going on. Editing Shelby, look this up and put text here on the bottom if it's still happening, but there were wildfires in Canada over the summer, and they were pretty significant. And it was pretty bad here because Canada is literally like end of my block. There's a lake, and at the end that lake separates Michigan, where I live, from Canada. So we're very, very, very close to Canada. I could, in theory, swim to Canada from the end of my street, but I don't want to, and I'm not. I mean, I know how to swim, but I'm not that strong of a swimmer. Also, recreational water vehicles. Anyway. Canada is very close to where I live. And it doesn't even matter how close you are to Canada, because we saw what the smoke from Canada was doing to cities like New York over the summer too, which really, I was very cheesed. I will say this, okay, I'm on a tangent now and I'm sorry, but you know, it's not gardening season and this is my channel, and I like to listen to the channels that I watch. I like when they ramble about other things. So I'm gonna ramble for a second. The Midwest had to deal with, and I'm not talking just Michigan, I'm talking farther into the Midwest. I'm talking in Chicago and stuff like that. Chicago is nowhere, well, it's not nowhere near, I mean, it is nowhere near Canada, it doesn't touch. But like, the Midwest got so much smoke and smog and air pollution from those wildfires in Canada, but nobody cared about the wildfires in Canada until the people in New York started complaining about it. And the people in New York only had it bad for a few days, and we had to deal with it all summer here. Anyway, long story short, Canadian wildfires were impacting agriculture, including potentially the people who are, you know, the breeders who make our seeds. They make, you know, they grow the plants to get the seeds. And I had a panic moment over the summer where I was like, okay, well, this is going to impact the seed supply, which means seed supply is going to go up, like the cost is going to go up. Let's start thinking, let's start planning. Next year's garden, we'll buy the seeds now. So, and I'm telling you this more for accountability for myself. Okay, I'm not buying any seeds in 2024. I can't buy any seeds in 2024 because I bought quite a few seeds this year in 2023. And so I've planned I'm not saying I planned my garden around the seeds I bought, because I really planned my garden and then bought the seeds around my plan. Anyway, so a few things that I would like to try differently next year than I did this year. Two things that I didn't do right, I feel, this year were related to timing. The first thing that I didn't do very well was, I feel personally, I could be wrong, but this year I feel I planted my pumpkins too early, because my pumpkins were starting to ripen at the end of August and they were ready, and I had to pick them by mid-September, just because they were ripe and also the critters were going to get to them. So I had pumpkins kind of hanging out in my kitchen inside my house for a month and a half until I could put them out for Halloween. So I think this year I planted my pumpkins end of May, Memorial Day, which is the day that traditionally we kind of do our gardening around. That's when we start here, because that's about 2 weeks after our last frost. So end of May might have been a little too early for planting my pumpkins and my squash. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that back at least 2 weeks, though my plan is to get those in the ground before the end of June. So that's my squash. My squash are going to be planted later in 2024. The other thing that the other mistake I made, and it's not a mistake, it's just, you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. I was not, I mean, I was successful because I did have a harvest of lima beans, but I planted those a little too late because I could have planted them earlier and been harvesting them a lot more early. So I didn't plant those until end of June, mid-July even, the limas. So what I'm going to be doing in 2024 is essentially swapping the dates that I plant my lima beans and my pumpkins. I'm going to plant my lima beans end of May, and I'm going to plant my pumpkins mid-late June. So that's kind of that's the big lesson I've learned this year. Couple other things that I would like to do is make more attempts at cover cropping for the late summer, fall, winter. Gotta figure some of that out. And then there are other things that I'm going to be planning in 2024 that are going to be new to me. So one thing I had a lot of fun growing this year were flowers in my garden. And I plan to still grow flowers because I feel I've mentioned this before. Zinnias are my favorite flower. I will grow them until I find something I like better, and I don't think that's very likely. I also had a lot of fun growing bachelor buttons, or cornflowers as they're called in some places. I had fun growing bachelor button. I really enjoyed growing sunflowers, and I'm gonna keep growing those things. However, I think what I'm gonna do is kind of cut down on the number of flowers that I'm growing, or I'm gonna move them into another space. I do have that empty space behind my garage, which is kind of where my compost pile is. And I was thinking I may put some flowers there. Otherwise, it's just gonna be lawn and it's just gonna be more grass to cut. And if I'm being honest, that just doesn't appeal to me. I really don't love mowing my grass. I mow my grass because I have to. I want to be a good neighbor, and my neighbors will hate me if I don't. But I really don't enjoy mowing my grass. So having less grass to mow would be wonderful. Other things that I'm going to be doing, primarily in the garden, I'm gonna some things that I've grown that I'm gonna be growing again. I'm gonna be doing beans again. I'm gonna be doing bush beans in 2024. I did pole beans in 2023, but I'm gonna do bush beans, and I'm going to do, which I've done those before. I would like to grow my squash again. I'm going to be growing my squash again because harvesting and eating my honey boat squash is one of the highlights of my gardening year. I'm going to grow pumpkins again because that was a lot of fun this year. And I think as far as things that I've grown in the past that I'm going to be regrowing again, aside from my flowers, of course. I'm still going to be growing my sunflowers, my zinnias, my bachelor button. I'm all good. So that's all stuff I'm going to be growing that I've grown before. I'm going to do potatoes again, but I'm going to do them differently this year because I've never grown them in a container before. So I'm going to try growing them in a container. And then I'm going to try and maybe grow some other things in containers as well that I've done in the past, just not in this garden. I'm thinking I did basil. I grew basil in my garden when my garden was at my grandma's house. And I'm thinking I'm going to probably try basil in one of my porch pots. In my one porch pot. I only have one of those. I'm gonna grow basil in my porch pot and some other things like that. But as far as new things, I'm really excited because there's quite a few there's quite a few things that I've never tried before that I'm gonna try and make room for. Okay, I ran out of memory. That's okay, it happens. Everybody's memory runs out eventually. In this case, I'm really just talking about my memory card. Anyway, fava beans, aka broad beans, really, I'm always interested to see them because in the gardening channels I watch that are based out of the UK, you see them quite a lot. But fava beans are not, I don't see them here in Michigan. I would like to say, my guess is they're probably not that popular here in the United States, but I don't actually know that. So I'm just gonna say I have never in my life seen fava beans anywhere. So I'm gonna grow those next year because I always see them on the UK gardening vlogs. And from what I understand, they're a cool season crop. So that's actually something that I want to try next year. Like I said, our growing season here typically is end of May through mid-October because that's about 2 weeks after our last frost starts, is end of May. And one of the things that gardening is something I've only come to in adulthood. My parents and their families kept gardens when they were younger, and it's just something that my parents have kind of gotten away from over the years. But my dad's thing has always been Memorial Day, end of May, no earlier. But there are cool season crops, and I think that I could potentially start sowing things earlier next year. So that's going to be the thing that I'm really going to be trying next year in 2024, is playing with, I don't want to say playing with, but I am playing in a sense, because even though if my garden is successful, if it's not, there are grocery stores that sell produce. Now, the thing about the garden too, though, is if it's successful, that's nice because that's something that I don't have to go to the grocery store for, and I can leave that at the grocery store for someone else. So anyway, I have had good luck with things like beans in the past, and so I'm gonna try more beans next year. And some beans, like my bush beans, I'm gonna be I will be sowing my bush beans end of May and probably into early mid-June too. And my lima beans are gonna be going in end of May, early June. But fava beans, according to what I've seen, they're actually a cool season crop, so I could potentially get them in the ground sooner. So I'm gonna try those a little sooner. And again, another thing I've seen too is people can grow potatoes even when it's cool outside as well. Not cold, but cool. So I'm gonna also try doing potatoes during cooler weather as well. So that's kind of that's something that I'm gonna be trying differently. I also have seeds for cauliflower, which I'd like to try. I like cauliflower, I've just never grown it. And what else am I trying to grow? I've never grown nasturtiums before, but I have seeds for nasturtiums. I am gonna also be trying to grow sweet peas, which again, from what I understand, you can actually, those are kind of cooler season too. So I'm gonna try planting those around the same time that I'm planting my fava beans. And also I could do a spring planting of peas as well, which I think I likely will do. But the thing with, of course, sweet peas is you got to plant them away from the peas that you're gonna grow and eat, because sweet peas are quite poisonous. So had to do some planning around how I'm gonna separate the sweet peas from the pea peas. How old am I? 5? So that's kind of like my big thing next year. And then I'll grow, of course, my squash, my pumpkins, like I said earlier. Oh, and I think I'm gonna try, I realized in past years, this is my 5th year gardening. 2024 will be my 5th year gardening. And in 2020, I started gardening in 2020 because I had my heart set on it well before the pandemic happened. But the pandemic happened and I needed something that was going to make me not as depressed as the pandemic made me and many other people. And my grandma also, like, her life kind of got put on pause in 2020 as well. Like, her bowling league shut down, the senior centers all shut down, and they should have, as they should have. You know, older people are I don't want to say all older people are immunocompromised, but when you're older, you know, you do need to take a little extra care to make sure that you're not exposing yourself to things that are contagious. And as we know from that pandemic, the virus that was going around is extremely contagious. So anyway, grandma's life had to get put on hold. She couldn't go out and hang out with people. She couldn't be around people. So gardening was something she and I did together because it just kind of was something we did together. My garden was at her house. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about that maybe in the future. But it's a little different now that I'm in my own place. Grandma still has her garden though, and I may maybe next year share some footage of how her garden's going. But it's just a crazy world. I don't even remember how I got here. This is why we need to have a list of things we're gonna talk about. Where was I? Gardening, pandemic, hanging out with my grandma. You know, I don't know, but maybe it wasn't that important. It might not have been that important, so that's okay. This video is also going to be quite long already. So one last thing before I go, this is kind of what I'm doing over the winter. Since I'm staying inside, and because it's nasty here in winter. Well, it can be. It was like cold, rainy today. It was gross. But anyway, so during the winter, what I typically do is I read and I knit. And so I'm knitting right now. I'm almost done, but these are mittens that I'm making for my friend Tony for Christmas. They're kind of, I mean, that's probably a better picture. All I got to do is the thumbs now. These are going to be her Christmas present, and I need to finish them before tomorrow because I'm giving them to her tomorrow. All right, well, I may come back before the planning and gardening season really like gets started in 2024, but this is most likely not even most likely, this is 100% the last you're going to see of me in 2023. So until next year, I will see you again soon, and I appreciate you sticking around if you made it this far in the video. Thanks.